All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Tony Brown from Rantoul Police Department in Illinois. He has 36 years experience in law enforcement. So welcome to the show, Chief Brown. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate
Oh,
your
thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Of course, I was hoping that we could start with just some background on you. 36 years is a long time to be in law enforcement. I'd love some background on, maybe how you got started and what those 36 years looked like for you.
Oh, yeah. So law enforcement is something I wanted to do most of my life. I have actually a twin brother who also is in law enforcement, and we started our careers together and both worked at the University of Illinois Police Department. For I worked there for 28 years. I kind of started out as a patrol officer and sergeant, lieutenant, and moved up the ranks. When I left and retired from there, I was the deputy chief. And then I came to work for the Rantoul Police Department as the chief of police. Rantoul is my hometown, and it's the community I've always lived in. It's about 15 minutes from Champaign, Illinois. So
Did
it's a
I
perfect fit for me.
Did I tell you that I used to live in Illinois? Did I tell you
No,
yeah, so I lived in Rosemont for a little
okay,
while, and then I lived in Naperville area for
yeah,
a
up
little
in the
while.
suburbs, right?
Yep. Yeah. I'm curious to know, having a brother who is also in law enforcement, was there some competitiveness to that as you started to rise through the ranks? Like, did you guys compete against each other or?
We kind of worked together on promotional interviews and promotional testing, and so I mean, he's my twin brother, and we always got along. So I mean, I got promoted first, and then he got promoted. He retired as a lieutenant there, so a couple of years after I left, and and like I said, we both wanted to be in law enforcement. Since we were kids, my father was the sheriff of Champaign County, which is the county we live in. So we grew up kind of with that bug.
That's amazing. Do you feel like because you had him along with you for the ride that it helped you to kind of get through some of the highs and lows?
Oh, yes, I definitely. I always had somebody. Well, I always had my best friend, working with me. We worked different shifts and stuff, but we always, I think, we talked on a daily basis if we weren't on the same shift together. Uh,
That's amazing.
and and we would, talk about what happened or what things were going on, and whether it's of course we all have stresses in different points in the career, and some of that's with other employees, some of that's with some of the things you do, and have to work through. So it's always great for me to have someone that knew what I was talking about, and when we were little we had our own language, and so we've always been able to you know communicate and know what we're talking about, what each other mean by what we're saying. So,
I love that. And I don't know if you knew maybe at the time, because obviously we know that, wellness and even the word wellness in this profession looks so different now than it did, 36 years ago. But that's what you guys were doing, being
oh
able
yeah, it
to
sure was.
communicate, offload the stress, have that like um almost like a built-in peer support is what you had. You
Yep.
were talking to each other and being able to relate. And we know now the power and the importance of having conversations about these things and being able to offload that and not bottle it up and shove it down. And so, how lucky to have that so early in your career. Maybe you didn't know it at the time, but it was something that was beneficial for both of you and your wellness.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. On looking back on it, I think when I was you know a young officer, I don't know if I got hired in the 1989. So, but then the 90s was when I really, I guess, came of age as a police officer. I don't know that I don't remember anyone really talking about officer wellness at that point. It was more of a, later, 10, 15, 20 years into my career that you really saw a more focus on officer wellness and in that care about what's going on with the officers' lives outside of the police department. So
Yeah. And you already had so much experience with talking about stuff and, had maybe more of an open mind coming into that transition of, prioritizing wellness and
Mhm.
things like that. When we talked offline, you talked about a few other things that have helped you throughout the years with your own wellness. What were some of those things? And if you don't remember, I can point them out too.
Yeah, I don't know that I remember all those, but I mean, I feel like I have a positive attitude, and I think law enforcement is like any other segment of the population. You got the individuals who are kind of positive people, and then you have the individuals who are kind of negative in their approach to life. And I think, I believe that the positive people deal with situations better and have a better outcome ultimately in
Yeah.
life. Um, so that's definitely helped me, personally, um, and also family, and I've been able to also really kind of put my once I'm done working and stuff, you know, I think family was always most important to me. So I was able to you know spend quality time and really focus on my children and raising them and enjoying life with them. So I think being able to kind of put aside uh, work and leave it kind of behind you if you can do that, and then have a life outside of law enforcement is extremely important.
I love that you talked about positive mental attitude. I've heard this referred to as PMA, which is, you guys love your acronyms. So just an easy way to remember positive mental attitude. Uh, I'm interested to hear your perspective on this, but I think that positive mental attitude can be trained. I think that there are some people who are maybe inherently that way, and you come out and you're just a really positive, joyous person, and there's some people that maybe come out with a different personality. But there's so much science to gratitude and positive mental attitude. And I think that if you are not maybe inherently that way, that can be trained over time. But I think that it has to be something that, you put effort into and something that you want to do. Do you think that that can be trained, that that's something that maybe, someone who doesn't feel that way in the moment can learn to?
Oh yeah, I mean if someone's willing to change and look at life differently and look at what they're doing differently, I definitely think they can change their perspective on how they look at things. I mean I've seen it in my department here. We've had individuals who are kind of uh, I don't know, disgruntled or unhappy, and they really have that negative focus. And I've seen one individual particularly that, I mean, just in the last year, I mean, he's changed his attitude. Seems like a happier person. He's treating people better, as a result out on the street, coworkers. He's volunteering. He's taking steps to improve himself, you know, through education. So
Yeah.
it's really night and day for him. So I definitely think that it is possible.
I think you're exactly right, though, that you have to want it. And I think that
Mhm.
that can go for so many different topics. Like, if you want to eat better, like you have to want it. If you want
Yeah.
to be more fit, like that has to come from you. And maybe sometimes it's good to have someone maybe give you a little bit of a reality check of like, man, you are so negative, for you to be like, oh, like I didn't even realize it, and to have the awareness. But in order to make a change, I think that you have to ultimately want it, and that drive has to come from you. I know that you talked about work-life balance, and you said the word priority. And I think this all kind of like intertwines. These things have to be a priority to you, and because none of these things are easy. I think it's a lot easier to be negative and focus on those things. It's a lot easier to be unhealthy. It's a lot easier to maybe allow the job to seep into your family life, and for you to not be present and to be disengaged. It's harder to put in the work and that conscious effort with things, and that work home life balance is, easier said than done, I know for a lot of people, but I love that you said my family was a priority to me. And so I wanted to make sure that I was present for them so that I can raise my kids. I can be there for my family in the best possible way. And I think it really is that one word, like, are these things a priority for you? And if they are, then how to get there becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah. And going back to the something you had said about, I think also if you have someone that you can trust, or if there's a supervisor or a coworker that sees someone struggling, that the impact that you can have on them, by just letting them know what you're seeing, and can really have a positive impact. Throughout my career, I've gone up and down like a lot of people at different points. And I remember at one point, I don't even know what all the issues was, but I remember having kind of a negative, you know, attitude about something, and I had a sergeant, call me in and tell me what he was seeing, and that's all it took for me. It's like, oh, okay, let me change that, and that never happened again. I mean, where someone, I got to the point where someone saw something and had to call me in and say something to me. But that's all it took for me, is that they took the time to say something to me, and that changed my how I was seeing things and how my attitude. So.
Do you think that he approached it in a way of like, I care about you and I want to show you what I'm seeing? Or how was that approach that got you to kind of be like, oh,
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and, they hadn't seen that in me. There was actually two sergeants that brought me in, but they were working together, and they hadn't really seen that negative attitude from me. And
yeah.
and again, I don't remember what it was. It's been too long ago, but and for whatever reason, I must have been going through a bad time, right, for that week or that whatever. But it was enough of a change that they wanted to address it before it got out of hand. I think we've all, if we've been in this career very long, we've seen those officers who have, and I know when I was, they always said what the 7 to 9 year mark is when officers kind of hit a point. And that was probably about when I was, experiencing this, and it's probably something that, the chief or somebody had come down with a rule or something that we didn't like, and I was having an attitude about it, and it was out of character, and they addressed it quickly, and I'm thankful for that, because that was probably a point in my career that I could have taken a different path. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that, you got to look out for each other and you need to look for those signs. But I think that what you said is it sounds like it came from a space of like, we want you to win and like we support you and we value you. And so we want to bring this to your attention because we know that you have more potential than that. That we know that like that's not who you normally are. We're seeing that shift and like we care about making sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
And I think that if you, and everyone has that ability, right? Everyone has the ability to look out for someone else and to approach it. And maybe I think it gets a little tricky because I think that sometimes peers don't like telling other peers things that maybe like you feel like you're getting into someone's business. And so a lot of times leadership will take it upon themselves to be the ones who do that. But I do think that everyone has the ability to look out for each other. And if maybe you're not comfortable going to another peer, you can, mention that to leadership of, hey, we're noticing some of these things because ultimately you want that person to win, you want that person to grow, and you want them to be okay, and maybe some of those signs are a sign of something deeper that need to be addressed.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you never know what impact that your small thing you do that can have a major impact on someone's life, on someone's career. So
Yeah.
it's just not out, when you're on the street handling a call. We know we can have a major impact on different people's lives and stuff like those, but you can also have an impact within the department, and with a coworker that you're working with. And I think also start, our first line supervisors, we really, you know, sometimes we, at my department, we see like, okay, this first line supervisor, yeah, really sometimes, early on, they don't understand what their roles are completely. And, And I think one of the roles, important roles, is to be that coach, be that mentor to people, and 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 address issues early on. We know that when you address if they're doing something wrong, not doing something quite right. When I say that on the street, if you can address it early and change that, and correct that behavior, then they're going to do it right. And I think the same thing's true with um, with attitudes and uh, with the way their officers look at the job and how they perform their jobs. If you can get to them early and coach them, and come from that space of you know you mean well and you want to see them succeed and be their best person, um, that can have a major impact on them.
I agree. And I think that you are a perfect example of that. You had two sergeants who potentially changed the trajectory of your career. Like, who knows what would have happened if you would have maintained that, negative mindset instead of
Yeah.
correcting it. And so I completely agree with you. And I say it all the time. I think that, it's a snowball effect because and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that because they took the time to sit you down and say, we care about you, that changed the trajectory of your career. And now that positive mental attitude has helped you and now you're able to help others in the same way that they helped you,
Oh
because
yeah.
now you have that experience of like, wow, like they looked out for me. So I want to do that for other people. And then the people you help are going to want to help the people under them. And so it's this like ripple effect that happens. And it starts with that one act of awareness, that one act of kindness, and it has a forever impact.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. That's I hadn't really thought about it like that necessarily, but you're absolutely right. So
Yeah. Well, I try to be right all the time. So I know when we talked offline, we were talking about how critically important both physically or physical and mental health are, especially in this profession. What resources have you used or things that you've implemented organizationally that have helped you guys out from a physical or mental perspective?
a couple things. Well, for physically, I'm one. I mean, I'm a little overweight, of course, and everything, but I still, for the last at least 15 years, I've been working out, running, most of that time, a little bit every day and stuff. And I think when you're physically fit, that helps you mentally recover even. And if you, I always do it at the beginning of my day because I feel like when I work out and I run, that kind of puts me in a positive space for the rest of the day, or at least to get started. It kind of jump starts me.
Yeah.
And um, and over the years, when I was at for example, the University Police Department, they instituted a workout time. So every other day, an officer can work out for 30 minutes if they chose to do that. Here at Rantoul, um, we allow officers to work out an hour and a half over a 2 week period if they choose to do that at the village has a fitness center. So that the village runs, and they can go there and work out if they choose to. We've also looked at other things like buying memberships to gyms and stuff, and with some success. And I mean, when we've done that at the U of I or at here, I mean, again, the problem is you have the people who want to work out will work out and take advantage, and those who don't want to do that don't necessarily won't participate. But we have that available to them if they want to do that. So
I think that like it's so challenging because you're never going to get 100% of people doing really any singular thing. Um,
mhm.
and I think that I would hope that everyone wants to do some sort of physical fitness, and it doesn't have to be one particular routine. Like it doesn't have to be like everyone doing CrossFit or everyone running or everyone lifting. But I do agree with you. I think that physical wellness really, really helps. And there's so much science to support this. It really
Yeah.
helps your mental health. It helps with nervous system regulation. And if you can do something, like something that makes you feel good physically, and that could be as simple as walking. We talk about like getting your steps in or
Yeah.
getting outside, like having something physical. Go play pickleball. I know pickleball is like a big thing right now, or go swimming, do some laps. Like there's so many different things that you can do. But I agree with you. It's so important and it does impact your mental health. And I have to do it in the morning. I,
Yeah. Well, that's the way I am too.
yeah, there's no way. And
Somehow it's much easier in the morning to get it out of the way and do it. But
yeah, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely easier. Because for me, like, and anyone who's listening can probably relate to this. And of course, it depends on shifts and it depends on a lot of different things. But I get my, I get myself up at 4 in the morning and it's not fun. I'm not a morning person. If anyone knows me, I'm a monster in the morning. Like I would rather sleep in. But that's the only time I'm going to do it. At the end of the day, when I'm exhausted, after you've already eaten like the food and everything that like maybe you feel more tired, the caffeine is starting to
yeah,
wear off. Like the chances of me doing anything after the fact is slim to none. And I know everyone's different, but I think trying to find space in your schedule, and again, it goes back to that word priority. If
yeah,
this is a priority to you, because I know the pushback is always, well, I don't have time for the most part. Like the vast majority, when I talk to people, they're like, well, we just don't have time. And it's like, well, that's true. You are really busy. But there is a prioritization of time that can happen to where you can do 5 minutes of something, 10 minutes of
yeah.
something, 20 minutes of something, like a couple times a week. That can happen. But again, is it a priority to you? And if it is a priority to you, then how can you fit it in? And it might not be convenient. It might be 4 a.m., but at least you're doing something that's helping you physically and mentally. So I agree with you on that.
And we even have, I mean, I know we have a couple officers that record their steps and while working even, and they'll go out and walk, different areas and stuff. And I think that's great. I mean, you're getting fitness in, plus you're also, kind of walking within the community and walking around the neighborhoods and doing that. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone, as we would
Yeah.
say. So,
I have kind of a funny story. I don't know if anyone else will think this is funny, but I do. So, I live in a gentrified area and it's really cute, but it's also a little sketchy. And I tried doing that where I was like, I'm going to take meetings like on my headset and I'm just going to go walking. And the very first time I did that, I got maybe halfway around my block and I was like going straight towards this really large homeless man. And I was like, and I'm going to turn back around and run back inside and, and
yeah.
I'll just take meetings from indoors. But I do like that idea of like, how can you combine some things? It's called habit stacking, actually. And so, like, how can you incorporate wellness into things that you're already doing? So, for me, for example, if I have 5 phone meetings, how could I maybe go on the treadmill or how could I go outside and maybe walk around the block? So, it's not carving out additional time, it's just utilizing the time that I already have in a different way. The same thing goes for, we talk about positive mental attitude. There are things that you can do to train that. So maybe you have a gratitude practice where you wake up every day and you're like, I'm grateful for these 3 things, and it makes you more positive.
Mhm.
Do that in the shower. Do that while you're brushing your teeth. Just think of 3 things that you're grateful for. And that's again habit stacking. So we're not asking you to take an additional 10 minutes, but how can you use the time that you have a little bit more effectively?
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing that I mean, so a few years ago we started a social work program within the department. We hired a social worker, and we call it the For You Rantoul program. But it serves the community. But part of their mission is to focus internally and focus on officer wellness and different initiatives. And they've tried a number of different things within that, peer support, and setting up peer support programs and setting up different events for us to participate in. And for a while we were using Cortico, if you've ever heard of that.
Yep.
I think Lexapol sells that, but too expensive, so we had to get rid of that. They love their product, but and it wasn't really being used as much. But which is Cortico has a bunch of resources if someone's not familiar with that on an app. From mental health resources to financial resources, from just about anything. speak with a peer support person and those type of things. But unfortunately, we weren't seeing that that was being used, so we moved on from that and tried different things.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's kind of what one of their missions is. And I know I think you do yoga or train yoga. I think I saw on your website or whatever, and that's one of the things that this team had noon yoga things, and some of the investigators and some of their staff were going over at noon doing yoga within the village and
Yeah.
over their lunch hour. So I think any little bit helps, with physical fitness and trying to stay fit. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, like we said before, it's not a one size fits all. So, how can you
mhm.
have lots of different options? And sometimes it's not going to work. Like and I think having the openness to try, like you said, like we tried this and maybe this didn't work, but then we tried this and this was
Yeah,
successful. And so, um, you know, I think that when you look at the agency as a whole too, it's like, okay, maybe noon on a Tuesday works for our detective team, but it doesn't work for our night shift patrol.
yeah,
So how can we have resources that kind of cater to the various roles within the organization and schedules? And but I think the key, and it sounds, I mean, I know talking to you offline that having leadership that prioritizes wellness and is open-minded to be able to kind of adapt to what the agency needs in this time, because I think that that's going to change too.
yeah,
I think that, like, as you get new employees in, like, there might be other things that they're interested in. And so, there's never, I heard this from another chief that I really liked it, and they said it's not an end journey, like there's no destination to wellness is what they said. And so it's ever evolving, and how can you evolve with it and just make sure that everyone feels supported. We talked a lot, and I really am interested in hearing your perspectives on this because I have a friend who works in the heart health space. He owns a nonprofit where he helps to get AEDs to law enforcement. He has his own personal experience with having a cardiac event. He was a very fit SWAT guy. I think he was like
yeah,
26. Um, Died in his living room with his fiance, who's now his wife at the time. And it was several minutes until I and I don't want to butcher his story, but from what I can remember, the first on the scene was law enforcement, but they didn't have the tools that they needed. So they had to wait for the fire department to get there to be able to resuscitate him. And he lived. He lives to tell this story, and now his life is all about heart health. And he has some really interesting statistics because now what the data is showing is that the number one killer of law enforcement is um, heart disease, cardiac arrest, like heart related things. And I know that that's something that you guys have been prioritizing is how can you, implement resources that are going to help with early detection. Can you give a little bit of insight into what you guys do, how that got started, and some of the things that you're seeing with that?
yeah. A few years ago, we sent a couple of our a deputy chief and a sergeant to the cops conference. I think it was in Florida, and they had a doctor present on cardiac or coronary disease, and I believe this. I mean, I think he's a doctor and a police officer, if I'm not mistaken. But and they brought back and from that, and I didn't realize that coronary disease is the number one killer of law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it doesn't always count because often those coronary incidents, heart attacks are occurring after work hours. But the events that are causing them, we live in or we work in a profession that is low stress, but then high stress almost instantly. You have the your heart rate goes, what is that called? I'm trying to think of the name of that, but your heart rate, speeds up and goes crazy. You have the adrenaline rush
Mm-hmm.
and a dump, and those events affect you, just a minute because you go home. Those events aren't necessarily over. that's when they often see the heart attacks occurring. So they don't count as work related events,
Right.
but it's still the number one killer in law enforcement. And I think law enforcement officers are, um, I think their death rate is 22 years before the general population.
Hmm.
Uh, and also, I think when they're seeing heart attacks, it's occurring several years before the general population. I think officers average is 40, maybe 49 years to have the first heart attack as average, where I think general population is 65. Um, what they brought back from that and from that conversation, that presentation is that, learning that most of those, if you catch heart disease early, it can be prevented, and you can kind of roll back that, and you can do that through um, blood test, calcium scoring,
Hmm.
and or I think the two major pieces of blood tests where they can look at something in the blood to see if you're at risk for heart attack, and also the calcium score. And I think if they get the calcium score with through medication, you can kind of push that back. So um, I believe what the individual who did the presentation was offering is, his company would go around to departments and for a fee, of course, to test each officer, test the officers and do these basic tests so you can identify officers who might be at risk. So I mean, we had contacted his group, and you needed so many officers, and our department's 31 officers, so we weren't large enough for him to come down with all the equipment and their bus they have. So what we did was reach out to our local hospital,
Mm.
um, kind of provide information to them on what this individual, what they were offering for testing. Their cardiologist reviewed it and developed a program for us, um, and it was really quite. I mean, it was really inexpensive compared to. I think if someone has a heart attack, they say it's going to cost. It's going to cost if they have a heart attack on duty. It'll cost the city and the community like 400 to 600, $700,000 for the medical care.
Wow.
So we thought this was definitely cost. I mean, it was. So there's kind of two stages, and if you're under 35, there's the basic rate, which I think they were doing a screen and a survey, and you're talking to the doctor, and perhaps the blood test. And if you're over 35, you got the blood test, the calcium screening, and also they ran you through a stress test also. And I think the basic was about $500 per person, and the advanced one was only $1,000. So we thought that was a great price,
Yeah.
and great opportunity to kind of serve, not, I mean, and you really serve our officers, and provide them this opportunity to ensure that they're in good health and their hearts are in good shape. So we offered that out to our officers. Fortunately, surprisingly, it's always, you can offer something, but you don't get everyone to take advantage of it. So what I thought was amazing is we had only 11 people participate,
Mm.
but of those 11, three of the individuals identified some issue with their heart. So, and a couple of them were more minor, AFib and arrhythmia, I think. But one of the individuals had a major defect of his heart. I think it's from childhood even, and he really could have something wrong with the valve, and he could have at any point just died. Um, and if something would have happened, there would have been no saving him. So he had to have open heart surgery, and he was off of work for several months. But I mean, that really, I mean, it's a win. I see that as a huge win. If 3 out of 11 have some issue that we've been able to identify, I mean, this program, to me, it's awesome. So
I agree that that's a huge win. Like that, the percentage on that is amazing, and I think it's just a testament of the importance of proactive wellness and early detection for things.
you know,
We know, I mean, and maybe people are tired of hearing stats, but I think that
Yeah,
it's important to understand. It's like, that this career has a lot of challenges physically, mentally. Like you said, stress
yeah,
is really hard on your body. It's hard on your heart, blood pressure, heart rate going up, your heart's on overdrive. Nutrition is another thing that, attributes to heart health. There's a crazy statistic that I saw that said, um, sitting for long periods of time, a sedentary lifestyle can increase heart attack by like 147%. And we
mhm,
know that, just as humans, we tend to live more of that sedentary lifestyle.
yeah.
We're sitting in our car, we're sitting on our couch at home, we're not as um, mobile as maybe previous generations. We're in front of our phones, our computers. And so there's a lot of contributing factors. Stress is a huge one, though. And so it's how can you, one, get in front of it and be more proactive and try to offload some of those things. So, how can we, it goes back to what we said before, how can you be more physically active, taking care of your physical wellness? How can we focus on regulating the nervous system as much as possible? And we can do that through a number of different things. Physical exercise is one of them that we can do, breathing techniques, mindfulness, things of that nature. But then, how can we also be proactive in, um, like we said, that early detection? And I think that that's really hard. And I'm curious to know, like, how are you getting, you said the under 35 is kind of like, that's step one. How are you getting young officers to recognize the importance of being proactive so that they're not in a position where now there's a problem and they have to address it?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, um, I mean, we bring it up, you know, at least once a year. Yeah, I mean, I think we started this 3 years ago, this program, and at least every year we bring it up. You say, hey, this is an opportunity, you know, instead of just letting it kind of die the program die or whatever. We try to bring it up again, and we highlight. We don't use people's names, but we're a small enough agency. Everybody knows, kind of who's going through what or whatever. So they know that. But we remind people that that we've had success with this, and we encourage them to participate, and we try to keep it alive that way. Like I said, what we had about 11%, 11 to 15% participate. Well, no, that's more. That's I'm not doing my math right. About 30, what 33, 35% participate. So, which again isn't great, but it's better than
Nothing, yeah.
better than those who didn't. And we're trying to get to those people, and then we also bring it up because we have like every agency, I think since COVID and stuff, have had a lot of turnover and new officers, and we're all struggling with that. And we try to also let them know we have this program. So
Yeah. I think one of the things that just came into my head, and I can relate to this too, is I think when it comes to health stuff, there's fear, fear of like finding something, and I think that that is debilitating for people, where it's almost like ignorance is bliss. You'd rather not know, and I think that if you can start as early in the career as possible, um,
mhm.
and have like a baseline of like, okay, this is where I am. And you're good early because we know like when you're younger, e- especially like first starting out in this profession, the chances of something being really, really wrong is probably pretty low. Like you're
Yeah,
young, you haven't gone through a lot of like stress and trauma. And so I think if you can maybe make that a part of your yearly routine where it's not like you let it go and now you're like, oh, shit, like what is there, I'm scared of like, hey, this is just what I do every year I do blood work, I do a physical, I
yeah,
go to the dentist, I maybe see a therapist, and it's more of that like maintenance, not because something's wrong but just because it's something that you do. And I have personal experience with friends who went a really long time without going to the doctor, and then they found out that they had really progressive cancer.
yeah,
And, it's like could they have, and to the point where like, they weren't able to have children. And, there were things that happened that way, that were really devastating. And the question I think is like, if you would you have been able to detect that earlier and maybe it wouldn't have been so detrimental? So I think that as scary as it is, it's good to start as early as you can. And if you haven't been doing it, start now and, try to address what is there.
So, and one of the things that we also do is we try to incentivize, we encourage people to go get their yearly checkup.
Mhm.
And then we do that by, giving them $250 if they have their checkup to at least pay for part of their, uh, the physical, their costs associated with that. $250 isn't really much. It's not probably much of an incentive, but it's something. And that's one way we also try to encourage people.
Yeah.
Um, in our town, we just had a village employee, not police department, but who died of a heart attack, and 60 some years old, and just had a heart attack one night, and he's gone now, and that just happened last week. So you would think that at a certain age, I think someone said his father may have died early. So you would think a doctor, knowing that history, would be testing for this, but they're not necessarily testing for that. If you're waiting for your doctor to do these tests, you know, that may never happen. So,
Mm.
I think it's important to take advantage of and being your own advocate when you're seeing the doctor. If you have a family history of heart disease, let them know and ask for a test. And if your department is willing to pay for, some of these tests, you take advantage of it. I mean, the only thing you have to lose is, you have anything to lose. I mean, you might find out you have some issue, and you get to deal with it early before it threatens your life. So
Yeah. I think an important thing to remind everyone of too is like, you know, historically these things were not prioritized and
no.
now they are. And to your point, you have organizations who are giving you the opportunity for free to do these things.
Yeah.
Like they're investing in you and they have these, workout options, therapy
Mm-hmm.
options, cardiac screening options. If you don't utilize these things will go away, because
Yeah.
it's resources. And so I know it sounds silly, but it's like, hey, like if that's important to you, and we know for a lot of young people, they're coming into organizations saying, what are you going to do for me? And there's an expectation that the organization is going to take care of their wellness and provide some of these resources. But if you have an expectation of your organization to provide these things, you have to also be willing to take advantage of those things. And so I think that it's a partnership. And
Yeah.
if you walk in and you're like, no, I'm not going to take care of that free or take advantage of that free screening or, the $250 to get a physical, there might be a time where the organization says, okay, well, no one's using it, so we're not going to do it anymore.
And then that's a real possibility,
Mhm.
especially when anything that costs money. If this tight budget, tight issue, things have to be cut, and if something's not being used, it's likely going to be cut.
Yep.
So
So if anyone's listening on here, this is your sign, take advantage of the resources. Obviously you might not be able to take care or take advantage of everything, but try to do as much as you can, especially if it's free, especially
yeah,
if it's a priority to you, which, a lot of these things we talked about should be key priorities for you
yeah,
and for your longevity. So my final question for you is,
yeah.
what words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Um, that's not necessarily easy to think of. I think words of wisdom is, again, have a have a positive attitude. Um, you know, they're not out to get you. um, Even though sometimes things may not go exactly the way you want them, or as you think they should. I think for the most part, everyone's trying to do their best job they can, and the best for officers, best for the community. and sometimes there's conflicting um, you know issues and stuff. So it's not just black and white oftentimes. Um, so really, keep a positive attitude and work for yourself and and don't worry about what anyone else might be doing or getting or how they're complaining or what opportunities someone else may be getting. You work for opportunities for yourself in your career. So,
Love it. Positive mental attitude, work for yourself, advocate for yourself. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much. I really value your insights on everything we talked about, but I haven't had a conversation yet on this podcast that really kind of talked about, early detection and screenings and heart health in, a deep dive. So I appreciate your time so much. And that's all I have for you. But if I missed
all right.
anything and if there's anything else you want to add, I can give you the floor if there's anything else you'd like to.
Um, on just one positive thing, I think, when I began my career, mental health really wasn't discussed, and you're supposed to suck it up and man up and not let things bother you, that you might see the traumas that you see and stuff. I think we're a lot smarter now. We know traumas all add up, and we're all different. Some people are affected differently by it. So I think one of the positive things I see is that the younger generation is much more open to their wellness and to a proper work-life balance. So I think that's very positive for us as a field. So moving forward. So
I agree. I'm actually excited for the future. I'm excited to see like how this wellness space progresses and what that looks like.
mhm.
I think it's going to be really positive and it's going to, eventually just be what they've always done. There's going to reach a point where it's like,
Yeah.
I've always done this, and I won't be having podcasts like this anymore because they're going to be like, what do you mean? Like, we've always had wellness and, we've always done screenings and we've always, talked to therapists. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that progresses. So
Yep.
I'm excited for the future.
Yep. Me too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate it.
All right.